Hello, welcome back to my bookshelf. Please do subscribe if you haven't already. Today's video is the first in a series on Jacobitism. What is a Jacobite? Simply put, a Jacobite wishes to restore the Stuart kings to power. The name comes from the Latin for James, which is Jacobus, and references James II, the Stuart king of England, Scotland, and Ireland, who was deposed in 1688 in favor of the Dutch Protestant William of Orange. The fact that William's wife Mary was James's daughter lent an air of authority to the coup known as the Glorious Revolution, a name which reminds us, yet again, that history is written by the winners. Jacobite should not be confused with Jacobean, which describes the reign of James I, as in Shakespeare wrote many of his best plays in the Jacobean era. Neither should it be confused with Jacobin, which denotes ardent supporter of the French Revolution along the lines of Robespierre. Indeed, Jacobites and Jacobins could scarcely be more opposed ideologically. Intriguingly, Jacobitism was picked from its mahogany shelf and dusted off in 2008 by the Californian neo-reactionary blogger Mencius Moldbug. In his influential Open Letter to Open-Minded Progressives, Moldbug writes, "I am not a progressive, but I am not a conservative either. If you must know, I am a Jacobite." He hints at offering, quote, "the red pill that will turn you into an instant Jacobite," and here somewhat tongue-in-cheek of an, quote, "ascetic and fanatical devotion to the doomed old cause of the royal Stuarts." Moldbug critiques the Whig theory of history, which posits that we are always progressing towards some improved state. The Jacobite, who prioritizes stability, rejects the idea of change for its own sake. More concerned with eternals, he seeks to implement what is wise, given the facts about human nature. And if you are scandalized by the very concept of a fixed human nature, I invite you, dear open-minded progressive, to read Moldbug's aforementioned letter. But before we can truly understand what it might mean to be a Jacobite today, we must learn what it meant to our ancestors. We need to know why the Jacobites emerged, what hampered the project, and why someone like Moldbug, aka Curtis Yarvin, a 21st century atheist San Francisco computer programmer, calls himself a Jacobite, however lightheartedly. So let us turn to the 16th century, when the royal Stuarts of Scotland first made a claim on the English throne. Mary, Queen of Scots, is that claimant, and as such she is the mother of the whole Jacobite project. She enjoys a prominent place in the annals of speculative history. I have an affectionate bias in her favor, but I have to admit with some embarrassment that she was rather hopeless as a monarch and politician. Much of this was due to her chaotic personal life. A queen's private life is in no way private. It's even less so than a king's. The body of the monarch belongs to the people because it personifies them. The monarch's physical health, marriage, babies, all these questions affect the people directly. In my last video, The Making of the Virgin Queen, we see how Elizabeth I cultivated virginity, due in large part to the alarming failures of other preceding queens, her mother, Anne Boleyn, and her half-sister, Mary Tudor, in particular, Mary Tudor, aka Bloody Mary, not to be confused with Mary, Queen of Scots. The living queen who strengthened Elizabeth's resolve to remain a virgin was her cousin and shadow self, Mary, Queen of Scots, a woman she never encountered in person, but corresponded with for decades. Mary Stuart appeared on the scene early in Elizabeth's reign, and the neighboring tandem queens naturally invited comparison and contrast. Auburn-haired to Elizabeth's red, Mary was a regal 5'11", very tall for a woman even today. Everyone agreed that Mary, Queen of Scots, was beautiful, graceful, accomplished, and charming. She was also 11 years younger than Elizabeth. The two were closely related. Mary's grandmother was Henry VIII's sister, which meant that Mary had an excellent and uncomplicated claim to the English throne. Most Catholics viewed Mary as the true Queen of England. As we have seen, Elizabeth had to embrace Protestantism if she wanted the throne, since, as the daughter of the controversial Anne Boleyn, she was otherwise technically illegitimate. All in all, Mary posed a true threat to Elizabeth, and the English Queen was well aware of that fact. Most of Elizabeth's supporters were Protestant. However, many adherents of the old religion recognized that Elizabeth was the more skilled ruler whose version of Protestantism made some effort at including them. Once she had consolidated her power, Elizabeth brought stability to a nation which had seen years of political uncertainty, and ordinary people craved stability. Mary was the more orthodox choice in certain respects, but bringing her to the throne would involve the kind of upset that conservatives preferred to avoid, the kind of chaos that seemed to track Mary, Queen of Scots, wherever she went. Mary's turbulent life began at Linlithgow Palace, Scotland, in 1542. Her father, James V, died when she was 6 days old. The infant was crowned queen, and her mother, Marie de Guise, served as regent. Like most royal females, young Mary was peppered with marriage proposals from an early age. As a small child, she was initially engaged to marry her cousin Edward Tudor, Henry VIII's long-awaited son. However, her guardians decided that the 4-year-old Dauphin of France would be more suitable because he was a Catholic and because they wished to shore up this traditional alliance. Furious at losing the chance to join Scotland to England, Henry VIII sent raiding parties to frighten the Scots into handing Mary over. This effort came to be known as the Rough Wooing. The Scots thought it wisest to send Mary away. She sailed for France with a huge group of companions, aged just 5, to be educated for the role of queen consort. She spent 11 formative years at the court of Henri II, where she became close friends with her future husband. The French king countered Elizabeth's accession to the English throne by claiming England for France in the name of the young couple. Mary was 16 when they wed, Henri 15, but a severe infection carried him off 1 year later. The still grieving Mary embarked for Scotland and saw her kingdom again in 1560. She was 18 years old. Now Mary had to cope with an extremely quarrelsome bunch of Scottish lords. Her country was riddled with political faction. Moreover, the devoutly Catholic young queen found herself being attacked from the pulpit by the fire and brimstone evangelical preacher, John Knox. Knox didn't know which he objected to more, Mary's religion or her sex. The author of a polemic against female rule, First Blast of the Trumpet against the Monstrous Regiment of Women, a work that had earned him the enmity of Elizabeth I, Knox preached against Mary for attending Mass, dancing, and wearing elaborate gowns, among other things. She summoned Knox to court and attempted to reason with him, but her efforts came to nothing. So then she had him charged with treason, but the court found him innocent and released him to preach some more. Mary suffered constant challenges to her authority. The Catholic lords found her insufficiently favorable to them, while the Protestant lords resented her Catholicism, and infighting was constant. The emotional tenor of the Scottish court was overwrought. A French poet who had fallen violently in love with Mary had to be banished. Later, during a security sweep, he was discovered hiding under her bed and executed the next day. Things grew even more unsteady politically when the Queen married her cousin Lord Darnley, a handsome but cruel wastrel said to have bewitched the young Queen. He also possessed a claim to the English throne. Naturally enough, the marriage of these two enraged Elizabeth. It quickly turned disastrous, the marriage, that is, as Darnley was both ambitious for power and totally lacking in virtue. The hard-drinking Darnley became jealous of Mary's close friendship with her Italian secretary, David Rizzio. One night during dinner at Holyrood Castle, Darnley and his companions murdered Rizzio in front of Mary, who was 6 months pregnant at the time. She later gave birth to a healthy son, James, but the marriage never recovered. The following year, Darnley died in sinister circumstances. His house in Kirko Field was blown up, and he was found nearby, strangled. Suspicion fell on one of the Scottish lords, the combative, womanizing James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell. Bothwell went on to abduct Mary, imprisoning her at his castle in Dunbar, where he may have forced himself on her. The fact that she then married him made people suppose that she had conspired with him to murder Darnley. Few Scots wished to see Bothwell as king consort. Mary had lost the confidence of most of the Scottish lords. Bothwell met them in battle but lost. Meanwhile, Mary had given birth to stillborn twins. After embracing Mary for the last time, Bothwell escaped to Norway, and Mary was forced to abdicate in favor of her little son, James. She then fled over the border to England, leaving James in Scotland, and wrote to ask for Elizabeth's help. Mary's presence in England put Elizabeth in a strange position. Her doppelganger had now come within her borders. On the one hand, Mary was a close cousin and sister queen, so Elizabeth felt an urge to protect her interests. However, Mary retained her claim to the English throne. Elizabeth feared that Mary's presence in the country would serve as a beacon to English Catholic loyalists who saw her as their true monarch, as in fact it did. One conspiracy after another formed to replace Elizabeth with an arguably more legitimate Tudor queen who had already produced a son and heir. Little wonder Elizabeth felt threatened. In the name of security, Mary was moved from one English castle to the next. Gradually it became clear that her avowed bodyguards were in fact her jailers. But there was as yet no clear-cut evidence of complicity on the Scottish Queen's part. Finally, Elizabeth's spymaster, Sir Francis Walsingham, set a trap for Mary. Walsingham contrived to intercept coded letters between the long-imprisoned Mary and one Anthony Babington, a young Catholic nobleman who meant to assassinate Elizabeth and replace her with the Scottish Queen. Mary eventually spelled out her wish that France and Spain would invade England on her behalf. The Queen of Scots was arrested and tried in court, where she argued that she could not be charged with treason, since she was not an English subject. This strategy failed, and she was convicted and sentenced to death. Elizabeth's ministers were intent on seeing Mary executed, saying, quote, "So long as there is life in her, there is hope. So as they live in hope, we live in fear," unquote. The English Queen hesitated for years before actually signing the death warrant which triggered Mary's execution at Fotheringay Castle in 1587, 18 years after her arrival in England. In putting a fellow queen to death, Elizabeth set a dangerous precedent, and she knew it. The value of the royal body was debased. She made her own execution more conceivable, and she made other monarchs more vulnerable. It became easier to imagine laying hands on them. Because of this, we can, in a sense, lay the blame on Elizabeth for the execution of Charles I in 1649. In signing Mary's death warrant, she signed Charles's as well. Mary was always an alter ego for Elizabeth, a hot-headed younger sister who played out any number of risky decisions that Elizabeth herself was tempted to make, but never did, thanks in part to the Scottish Queen's example. Mary's life displayed the inherent trickiness of the position of queen regnant as opposed to queen consort. She had married and produced an heir, but both heir and husbands had threatened her sovereignty. The situation was made worse by the fact that Mary had disastrous taste in men. Elizabeth shared her cousin's taste for danger. She knew how to flirt with it, but carried herself with restraint, and the result was more stability for her nation than the Scottish queen was ever able to provide for hers. Mary died a tragic death, and yet Elizabeth only ever managed to delay the accession of the Stuarts to the English throne. After all this conflict, Mary's son, James Stuart, was still the next king of England. Mary had supplied the son that the Virgin Queen never produced, and James I was well placed to buttress the society that was experiencing, as Mencius Moldbug puts it, quote, perhaps the greatest artistic explosion in human history, unquote. And that's as good a reason as any to light a candle for Mary, Queen of Scots. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, like, and share this video.